I knew my family stopped loving me the moment they argued about my will while I was still holding the goddamn cake knife. It was my birthday. I'd just turned 78. My hands were shaking a little, not from age, but from listening to my children whisper like vultures behind me. "Do you think he left the house to you?" "No, no, Mom said he promised it to me." They thought I couldn't hear. They were wrong. The candles were still burning when I realized I was a ghost at my own celebration. My son clapped me on the back too hard, laughed too loud, and kept checking his phone. My daughter put on that fake smile she always uses when she wants something. Even my grandkids, God bless them, were too busy filming themselves for TikTok to notice the lump in my throat. At the hospital later that month, when pneumonia nearly took me, none of them came. Not a single one. The nurses pitied me, strangers brought me soup, but my so-called family? They texted occasionally, "Hope you're okay, Dad. By the way, do you have the safe deposit box key?" I lay there, staring at the cracked ceiling tiles, replaying every sacrifice I'd made. The double shifts. The mortgage I paid off so they'd have a home. The nights I went hungry so they could eat. And now they were circling like hyenas. That's when something inside me snapped. I decided if they wanted my money more than me, then I'd give them a show. Because what's the point of being treated like you're already dead, if you can't haunt them a little first? I bought a cheap notebook from the hospital gift shop and labeled it "Grandfather's Last Words." They had no idea it was going to become my blueprint for chaos. I started writing everything down. Every slight, every whisper, every greedy look they gave me over the years. Names, dates, embarrassing secrets, things they'd never want public. By the time I left the hospital, that notebook weighed more than my own heart. The first week at home was brutal. I was weak, coughing like an old engine, barely able to walk to the bathroom. My daughter visited, but only long enough to glare at me and say, "Don't expect us to clean up the house for you." I nodded politely and let her go. Inside, though, I was simmering. I tested the waters first. A misplaced checkbook here, a forgotten medical bill there. Little things that made them nervous, made them ask questions. The fear flickered in their eyes before they realized it wasn't an accident. It felt delicious. Then I realized something important. Revenge isn't just about hurting them. It's about control. Even if you're the weakest person in the room, you can make them sweat. But I had to be careful. One wrong move, and my plans would crash before they even started. That night, I sat alone, notebook in lap, thinking, how do you teach vultures to fly straight into a trap without them noticing it? The next day, I tried my first accidental slip, and they caught on faster than I expected. I thought the easiest trick would be the smallest one. Slip a prescription into the wrong pile and watch panic bloom. I was wrong. My accidental slip was meant to be a test, small, reversible, ridiculous. I put my name on a medication bottle I didn't need and left it where my daughter would find it. I wanted to see how fast greed would turn to guilt, or guilt into action. Instead, it turned into suspicion that pointed right back at me. I'd been up half the night coughing and scribbling, the notebook open like a map across my knees. My hand shook while I faked the calm of an old man who'd seen worse. At breakfast my daughter, Lena, came in on her way to work, glanced at the bottle on the countertop, and her face did something I'd never seen before, confused, then calculating. "Dad, why is there a refill for oxycodone on the counter?" she asked, voice low. I shrugged. Doctor probably switched something. I wasn't paying attention, my head's foggy. She narrowed her eyes. "You signed anything? Wills? Trusts? You sure you're okay to be alone?" The way she said alone was a test, like she was trying to bait me into admitting weakness. The old man reflex is to be honest, to spill your truth because you want to be seen. But I learned to smile instead. "I'm fine," I said, setting the coffee cup down a little too hard. "Maybe talk to the nurse on Monday." She left in a hurry, phone already in her hand. Minutes later, the house phone rang. My son, Mark. Dad, Lena's asking if you're getting your meds from the same doctor. Dad, we should probably check the house. You remember the safe combo, right? We'll come by. A familiar pattern, concern folded into inventory check. I could hear the pivot in his voice. Concern was a cover. I told him yes, the combo hadn't changed. I told him I was resting. He said okay, but his okay had teeth. I'd expected some immediate panic. Instead, they formed a strategy: call the lawyer, scan the cabinets, talk in low voices in the living room like they were planning a bank heist. They never came down the hall and hugged me. They came to inventory me. That night I realized my slip had exposed something else. My family had become experts at reading weakness. They could smell it like blood. My little test hadn't made them sweat, it made them accuse me of hiding things. They weren't afraid of losing money, they were afraid of losing control. And control, it turns out, makes people crueler than money ever could. So I adjusted. Bigger moves would need planning. Smaller moves needed camouflage. But before I could regroup, something new happened. Someone who didn't belong in their calculations noticed the house. Mrs. Halpern, the neighbor, stopped by with a casserole and a worried look. She's the kind of person who waters her plants like they owe her rent. She had noticed the delivery vans that came by more often, the way the grandkids filmed everything, the whispers. She stayed longer than she needed to. "Are you all right, John?" she asked, touching my forearm like we were in the same weather. "People talk, you know. They say your kids have been distracted." I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to say, they were vultures, they argued over my kitchen table like an estate auction while I coughed under a blanket. But I didn't. I sipped the tea she brought and said, "They love me. They're just busy." She gave me a look that translated to, "You don't have to convince me." Then she leaned in and lowered her voice. "If you ever need a witness, someone to say you were here, or that you weren't signing anything, call me." Her eyes were sharp. "And John? Hide that notebook somewhere safe. People pry." I almost laughed. Here was a stranger offering me a foothold. If my family had been a wall, Mrs. Halpern was a handhold. She didn't pity me the way my children did. She offered utility, and that was more dangerous than kindness. 2 days later, I realized my slip had one more consequence. The doctor called to check on me and suggested a home health nurse. A nurse would mean records, logs, and someone else's eyes in the house. My kids cheered the idea like it was a security upgrade. I felt it immediately, the safety net closing over me. "You'll get the care you need, Dad," Mark said over lunch, as if care were something you could buy off a menu. The nurse was competent and kind, but every visit came with a form, a signature line, and a system that could complicate my plans. I started to panic, not the wild panic of a man who had lost everything, but a slow, precise panic that comes from realizing your sandbox is shrinking. That panic pushed me into a stupid, human mistake. I moved the notebook. Not to a secret vault, not to the attic. I shoved it under the mattress, classic, idiotic, the sort of thing you see in bad movies. And of course, 3 days later my grandson came over, looking for a video game controller, climbed onto my bed, and there it was, the corner of my notebook peeking out like a tongue. He picked it up and flipped through pages, giggling at what he thought was Granddad's nonsense. That giggle brought Lena storming in. "What are you doing with Grandpa's things?" she hissed. I should have been calm. I should have acted nonchalant. Instead, I reacted like a man caught with a secret. "Put that down," I said too sharp. The room froze. The kids stopped filming for once. Lena's face was a storm. "Grandpa, what is this?" she demanded, pointing to a page where I had written, in messy scrawl, about the time Mark sold my old watch and lied about it. She read the line aloud and then looked at me like I was a relic with a vendetta. "What, Grandpa? You keeping receipts now?" she mocked, and the laugh that followed was brittle. I felt the blood rush to my ears. I wanted to rip the book out of her hands, to tell her everything. I wanted to destroy her, but I didn't. I smiled. "I keep a diary," I said, and it sounded like the truth. They left soon after, whispering. Later, Lena texted me a photo of a note her lawyer had sent, an offer to come by to discuss estate planning and care arrangements. The subtext was clear: they wanted to lock everything down before I could do anything. I could have folded then. I could have signed some papers, handed them the keys, and died quietly in the knowledge I'd lost. But something colder than grief had taken hold. If they were going to treat me like an asset, I would become their worst liability. And yet, the notebook under my mattress had been exposed. My first intentional ploy had blown up in my face, and now they were watching my hands. I needed a new plan, one that didn't rely on sloppy hiding, on petty slips, or the mercy of neighbors. As I lay awake that night, listening to the house breathe, I made a decision. The next move had to be surgical. Precise. Something that would make them look like the greedy fools they were, and leave me with the last laugh. But before I could act, a call came through at 2 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end said, softly, "Mr. Davis? We found something in your name at the clinic, blood work that says you're not as sick as you claim." I froze. The line went dead. Who called, and why did they tell me I was lying about my illness? And more importantly, who planted that blood work? The voice on the phone made my blood run cold. "Mr. Davis? Your chart, it doesn't match reality." I'd been sick, or at least sick enough to scare my children into care mode, but suddenly someone was suggesting I was faking it. My first thought, my family. Had they gone behind my back, talking to doctors, trying to find a way to make me look unfit for the inheritance? I sat upright in bed, heart hammering, notebook still peeking out from under the mattress. The number was untraceable, the line dead when I tried to call back. My mind raced. Was it Mark? Lena? Or someone else? I knew one thing: my children were getting smarter, but I had an advantage they didn't see. I wasn't just an old man, they had underestimated my ability to scheme. And now, the scales were tipping in a way I hadn't anticipated. The next day, I started noticing small things. My mail had been rifled through. Packages arrived with the tape slightly torn. The home nurse seemed too curious about my daily routine. Even Mrs. Halpern's usually cheerful smile carried a hint of worry. Something was stirring beneath the surface, and I had to decide, was it threat or opportunity? So I did what any old man plotting revenge would do: I tested the waters. I left the notebook out, this time intentionally, spine up, open to a page detailing every small betrayal from the last decade. Then I went to the kitchen and made tea, humming loudly. Within the hour, Lena appeared, phone in hand, eyes darting to the page. I pretended not to notice. "You've been busy," she said, too sharply. "Keeping notes? Logging every little thing?" I smiled. Old age has its hobbies. Her jaw tightened. "Hobbies you shouldn't show anyone, Grandpa." I nodded, as if agreeing, but inside I felt a rush of triumph. She'd seen the notebook. She'd seen the evidence. And now she had a choice: ignore it and act normal, or try to get ahead of me. By evening, Mark stopped by unexpectedly. He lingered in the living room, glancing at the notebook as if trying to read my mind through the pages. "I think it's time we talk about your situation," he said carefully, voice like a surgeon's scalpel. "Your health, Dad, estate planning, maybe even a trust." I laughed quietly. "Trust? You mean trust me not to notice how much you care about money over me?" His face went pale. "Dad." I cut him off. "I don't trust you. And that's why I'm careful now." Mark left, but the tension lingered. They were scared, subtly, just enough for me to feel it. My first attempt with the misplaced prescription had failed, but this was the beginning of something bigger. That night, I checked the notebook under my mattress. Every entry, every name, every date mattered. But now I had to add something new, a line about the anonymous phone call. Someone was poking the nest. And poking the nest could be dangerous, but also useful. As I drifted off, I thought about the next step, turning their paranoia into action. But I also knew one thing: if I moved too soon, I'd expose everything. The wrong move could cost me not just the revenge, but the last scraps of dignity I had left. Then I heard a soft creak from the hallway. Someone in the house. Who's in the house in the middle of the night? Is it a thief, a spy, or my own children sneaking around again? I caught the shadow before it caught me, and for a second, I felt more alive than I had in years. The creak from the hallway wasn't a figment of my imagination. Someone was inside my house, moving like they thought I'd be asleep, helpless, an easy target. I grabbed my cane and shuffled toward the sound, every step deliberate, every breath silent. By the time I reached the living room, the figure froze. It was Lena, clutching her phone in one hand. "Grandpa, I just wanted to see what you've been writing," she whispered, panicked, but not apologetic. I stepped closer, cane tapping the floor. "And?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but sharp. "Curiosity or control?" She flinched. "Both, I guess." You guess?" I barked, louder than I intended. Her eyes widened. I realized, in that moment, how small our apartment felt, how tight the walls were, and how little power she actually had here. I let the silence hang. She shifted on her feet, glancing toward the bedroom, toward the nurse's equipment, toward the open window. Fear was a new tool in my hands. "You want to play detective in my house," I said, finally, "but remember, this isn't a game for kids." Her hands trembled. "It's just a notebook, Grandpa. Just memories." "Memories?" I echoed. "These are receipts of betrayal, Lena. And tonight, you learned the first rule: when you poke the nest, you wake the hawk." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. The phone slipped from her grip, clattering to the floor. I picked it up and set it aside. For a moment, I thought about letting her see the whole thing, every line, every secret. But no, I had learned patience. Revenge isn't a confession, it's a slow burn. "I want you to leave," I said, voice soft but icy. "Now." She didn't argue. She ran, the door slamming behind her, leaving me in the silence of the house, heartbeat loud, notebook pressed against my chest, adrenaline crawling down my spine. I realized something in that silence: fear is intoxicating. It's a weapon far sharper than anger. And suddenly, I understood why I hadn't yet gone for the big moves. My family's greed was already against them, they just needed the right nudge. By morning, Mark showed up, fuming. "Grandpa," Lena said. "Mark," I said, interrupting. "She's fine. You should be checking on yourself before you worry about me." He stared, confused, then narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, setting the notebook on the table like a challenge, "sometimes you have to let your kids dance into the trap themselves." He looked at the notebook, but didn't touch it. I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He knew something had happened last night. But he didn't know what. And that, right there, was victory. I smiled to myself. Revenge was no longer just an idea. It had legs. And yet, I also knew one thing: tonight would bring consequences I couldn't fully predict. Later that evening, I noticed something terrifying. Someone had left a note slipped under the door. Just 4 words: "We know your game." 4 words. "We know your game." My hands shook as I read them, not from age, but from the rush of adrenaline that comes when the hunter realizes the prey might bite back. I didn't know who left it. Lena? Mark? Or someone else entirely? Whoever it was knew enough to warn me. And that meant my next moves would need to be surgical, or the entire plan would unravel. I spent the day pacing, notebook clutched like armor. I reviewed every step I'd taken, every accidental slip, every word in the diary. I tried to trace the note, paper edges, ink type, direction it was slid under the door. Nothing. Whoever it was, they were careful. Then the first real panic struck. The nurse arrived that afternoon, cheerful as ever, but carrying more paperwork than usual. I'd forgotten to hide some of my evidence in the living room while I prepped tea. The notebook was partially visible. She paused, glanced down. "Oh, just a reading log?" she asked. "Yes," I muttered, voice clipped. "I like to keep track of books I've read." Her eyes lingered for a second too long. "Aha, well, if you need help organizing." I smiled tightly and waved her off. She left, but I knew the risk was real. My carefully controlled chaos could be exposed by anyone, even a stranger with good intentions. Later, Mark stopped by again. He didn't come in, just leaned against the doorframe, looking at me with that calculating expression he'd perfected over decades. "Dad, that note," he started, voice low. "It's serious. You should consider." "Consider what?" I interrupted. "Giving up the notebook? Signing the trust? Admit I've been scheming." He hesitated, then said nothing. He had realized, finally, that I wasn't bluffing. But he also realized I was still vulnerable. That hesitation, fleeting as it was enough for me to smile inside. That night, I had a near disaster. I had left the notebook in its usual hiding spot, mattress corner, thinking it was safe. But a creak in the hallway told me someone was in the house. I froze, heart racing. It was too dark to see clearly. "Grandpa," a whisper called. I grabbed the cane and shuffled toward the voice, every step calculated. It was Lena again, this time holding a flashlight, clearly trying to see without alerting me fully. I could have yelled. I could have chased her out. But instead, I let her find a blank page of my diary, pretending the notebook held only grocery lists and scribbles. "Nothing interesting here," I said casually. She squinted at me, lips pressed tight. "You're hiding something," she said. "We all know it." I laughed softly, a low, almost cruel chuckle. "Maybe. Or maybe you're seeing what you want to see." She left, frustrated, and I felt the adrenaline still coursing through me. Near disaster avoided. As I sat in the dark that night, I realized two things. My family was catching on faster than I'd expected. Fear was no longer a guarantee. They might start playing dirty. And then, I remembered the note. "We know your game." Whoever had left it was patient, clever, and dangerous. I had to decide, continue the slow burn, or accelerate before they closed in. The next morning, a package arrived at the door. No sender. No note. Just a small, unmarked box, and inside, something that made my stomach drop. The box was small, brown, unmarked, and inside, it smelled faintly of smoke and betrayal. I hesitated before opening it. Something told me this wasn't just a prank or a warning, it was a message. My heart thumped in my chest as I lifted the lid. Inside, neatly wrapped in tissue, was a single USB drive and a slip of paper. "Watch closely, or regret it." I sat down immediately, shaking slightly. Who was playing this game with me? My children? Someone from the clinic? Or was it someone else entirely, observing from the shadows? Plugging the USB into my laptop, I found a folder labeled Family Secrets. Inside were dozens of photos, receipts, even snippets of text messages, evidence of every lie, theft, and betrayal over the last 10 years. And in the middle, a video file labeled, "What John Knows." I clicked it. The video was shot from a hidden angle in my living room. There I was, just a few nights ago, handing the notebook to Lena during the midnight incident. The angle caught my hand, the notebook, my cane, and every detail that could expose my plan. My first reaction was pure rage. I had been watched. Observed. My private moves catalogued. Then fear hit. If the person behind this uploaded it somewhere, or showed it to Mark and Lena, my entire revenge plan could collapse before it truly began. But beneath the fear, another feeling grew, dark amusement. Whoever was doing this didn't know me. They thought they were in control. But the beauty of patience and calculation is that exposure can be used as leverage. The next day, Lena and Mark both called me incessantly. Texts, emails, video calls, they were frantic, agitated. None mentioned the USB directly. They didn't need to, their paranoia was evident in every word. I didn't respond. I didn't act. I let them stew. And then, just before nightfall, the first mistake happened. I had left my notebook on the kitchen table while brewing tea. Lena, barging in without knocking, spotted it immediately. "You never learn, do you?" she hissed. "How many times do I have to tell you to hide your little diary?" I met her gaze calmly. "It's not a diary," I said. "It's a map." She laughed nervously, unsure if I was joking or threatening. I let her stew a moment longer before adding, "And you? You just found the first waypoint." She left again, muttering under her breath. But now I had confirmation, the family was nervous. My moves were being watched. And the anonymous package had become a wild card. Someone else had eyes on the board, and I needed to figure out if they were friend or foe. That night, I stayed awake with the notebook and the USB. Whoever sent it had intentions, but I couldn't tell if they were helping or baiting me into a trap. One thing was certain, the game had just grown far more dangerous. I had one choice, to confront the mysterious observer or to let them keep watching. But before I could decide, my doorbell rang at midnight. When the doorbell rang at midnight, I didn't feel scared. I felt curious. That's when you know you've crossed a line. You stop fearing monsters and start wondering what they taste like. I opened the door slowly, cane in one hand, notebook tucked under my arm like a Bible. On the porch stood a young man I'd never seen before, mid-30s, hood up, holding a thermos of coffee like it was a peace offering. "Mr. Davis?" he asked softly. I'm the one who sent the USB." I said nothing, just stared at him. His hands trembled slightly. He glanced over his shoulder before stepping closer. "Can I come in? It's not safe to talk out here." I let him in. The living room felt smaller, darker, like the walls were listening. He perched on the edge of the couch, eyes darting to the framed family photos, then to the closed blinds. "I used to work for your son," he said, voice low. "He hired me to dig things up. On you. On your accounts. To see if you were hiding money, or if you were fit to manage your estate." My stomach tightened. "And you decided to help me, why?" He looked at the floor. "Because what I found, it's bad. They've already drawn up papers, forged your signature on a few drafts. They're planning to have you declared mentally incompetent by the end of the year. Once that happens, they'll take control of everything." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Forged my signature?" "Yes," he said. "I sent you the USB so you'd have leverage. You're not the only one keeping receipts." I sank into my chair, exhaling slowly. Rage wasn't the right word for what I felt. It was something heavier, colder. A kind of quiet grief that had teeth. "Why tell me now?" I asked finally. "Because they're accelerating the plan," he said. "They're scared. And scared people make mistakes. I thought you should know." I studied him. He looked sincere, but sincerity is just another mask. "What do you want?" He smiled sadly. "Nothing. I just don't want to see another family ruin someone the way mine did to my grandfather." We sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Then he slid a second USB across the table. "This one's worse," he said. "It has everything, emails, bank transfers, even the lawyer's drafts. Use it wisely." I held it in my hand. It felt like a grenade. He stood to leave, pulling his hood back up. "They're coming for you sooner than you think. If you're going to act, act fast." And with that, he was gone. I sat there until the first light of dawn leaked through the blinds, staring at the 2 USB drives, the notebook, the empty doorway. My family wasn't just circling anymore, they were lunging. And now I had evidence. But evidence isn't revenge. Evidence is just fuel. Revenge is the fire you light with it. I slid the new USB into the laptop. The files loaded. My hands didn't shake this time. The files contained one last surprise, a video of Mark and Lena at a lawyer's office, signing a document with my name on it. Date stamped, tomorrow. Tomorrow. That was the date stamped on the video, tomorrow. They thought they'd corner me. I was already 3 steps ahead. I spent the night planning, every move deliberate. The notebook, the 2 USBs, the files, they were no longer just tools, they were weapons. I mapped out the house, their routines, and the meeting at the lawyer's office. My plan was simple: make them look greedy, careless, and completely exposed. Morning came, gray and heavy. I greeted Lena and Mark with a calm I didn't feel. They didn't know that while they were plotting to declare me incompetent, I had already turned the tables. Coffee? I offered, voice gentle. Or would you rather start with the lawyer? Their eyes flicked to the notebook, innocently sitting on the table. I smiled. A predator doesn't run after prey, it waits, perfectly still. I loaded the first USB onto my laptop and connected it to a small projector. In the living room, I played the video of them signing the forged documents. Their faces went pale, even as they tried to mask it. You see this? I said softly, pacing slowly. You thought you could rush me, cheat me, declare me weak, and it would all be over? Lena's voice shook. Grandpa, it's not. Not what? I interrupted. Not greed? Not lies? Not betrayal? I let the silence hang, heavy as the chandelier above. Then I opened the notebook, flipping to pages where I had recorded every minor theft, every lie, every act of deception. I've kept a record, I said, pointing to each name. Every time you thought I was too weak to notice, I was watching. And now. I connected the second USB, showing emails, bank transfers, and lawyer drafts. The evidence was undeniable. Mark's jaw went slack. Lena's eyes glistened with a mixture of fear and shame. You've underestimated me, I said, voice cold, steady. And that is your mistake. For the first time, they were silent, truly silent. No excuses, no arguments. Just the knowledge that their own greed had been their undoing. And then, just as I was about to deliver the final blow, my phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Halpern. Don't get too cocky. The game isn't over yet. I paused. Even now, allies and threats blurred. Revenge wasn't just about exposing them, it was about surviving the consequences, anticipating every ripple. But in that living room, watching them squirm, I allowed myself a small, dark smile. As they left the house that evening, defeated, I realized something terrifying. My actions tonight had triggered a counter. A silent, subtle threat I hadn't accounted for. Something was coming for me, and it was closer than I thought.